listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, we speak with Greens MP Abigail Boyd. She is now seeking legal advice after she says she was assaulted by New South Wales police during violent protests in Sydney yesterday. She alleges police were attacking innocent bystanders and has likened the violence to what's unfolding on the streets with ICE agents in the US. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines. It's Tuesday, the 10th of February. A high-profile barrister has been found dead in his home just weeks after child abuse material was allegedly found on his phone by Australian Federal Police. Last month, Mark Dennis SC was travelling home to Sydney from Southeast Asia, where he also ran a children's charity, when authorities searched his luggage and discovered the material. New South Wales police found Dennis in his inner west home in Sydney, where it's understood he took his own life. The AFP is continuing their investigations. Ghislaine Maxwell has invoked her Fifth Amendment right to silence in front of a US congressional committee. Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirator is currently serving a 20-year sentence for sex trafficking. The committee was hoping they could question Maxwell, but she responded by reading a prepared statement via video link.
Ms. Maxwell, were you a close friend and confidant of Jeffrey Epstein?
I would like to answer your question, but on the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer this question and any related questions. My habeas petition is pending in the Southern District of New York. I therefore invoke my right to silence under the Fifth Amendment to the US Constitution.
Maxwell's legal team says Ghislaine could clear both US President Donald Trump and former US President Bill Clinton in exchange for clemency. And Sussan Ley has come out firing with reports she has told a Liberal Party meeting that, quote, disunity is death. As speculation continues, her days as leader are numbered. Ms Ley is set to face a challenge from Angus Taylor as early as this week after latest polling shows support is still plummeting for the coalition, with One Nation's primary vote now surging to 27%. Now it's time to get into our deep dive with Abigail Boyd on last night's pro-Palestinian demonstrations in the heart of Sydney. Thousands gathered at Town Hall Square in the CBD to protest the visit of Israeli President Isaac Herzog. As the speeches finished, chaos erupted. The New South Wales Premier Chris Minns has defended the actions of police, while the New South Wales Police Commissioner has accused speakers of inciting the crowd to march to New South Wales Parliament, saying police did what they needed to do, which was to hold the line. Abigail Boyd, who was at the rally, says she was horrified by what she saw unfold, violent scenes she never thought possible on the streets of Australia. Abigail, thank you so much for joining us. I want to ask, are you okay?
Yes, I am. I'm sore and feeling, shocked and still processing everything. But yeah, I'm okay. Nothing permanent.
Take us through exactly what happened to you yesterday afternoon and last night.
So I was up at the where the speakers had been talking from, up on the top of the stairs there in the square. When everyone was moving towards the George Street exit, there was a bit of a kerfuffle sort of near where the organisers were at that sort of, step area. So I decided I would stay there because there was a very good vantage point to start videoing. And, they always say that if you're worried about the wrong thing happening, start videoing. So I started videoing everything I could see from up there. And so I saw when the police rushed in on horses, and I could also see, and I've got very good recording of them blocking all of the other exits. So there was a situation where we weren't allowed to march, we couldn't get out onto George Street, but they also weren't letting people go out any other exit. So after a while of being there and filming, about 6 police officers came up the stairs and decided that I couldn't be there anymore and that I needed to go down the stairs and join the crowd, which I then did. I told them I was an MP and I was recording to make sure that, no harm came to anybody. And then when I got to the bottom, there was about, maybe 16 people praying because it was the time for nightly prayers, and there was plenty of room for police to push people the other way if that was their inclination around, but they decided instead to try and push us into the people praying.
We know that you're a member of Parliament. I'm a member of Parliament. I'm just recording, making sure that everybody's doing the right thing.
And it was at that point that just all of a sudden I got rushed from the side. And in the video you see like my feet leave the ground and I fall onto somebody else. And then as I'm trying to steady myself, just a police officer just punches me in the chin and into my chest. And then again, I'm like really pushed back, my neck flicks back. And then another police officer pushes me really hard in the chest. And and to be honest, I don't remember much after that. I've seen the videos, but I was in shock and I'm just trying to record. But then they picked up all of the people who were praying and just were picking them up and throwing them. And just, like, it was so violent. It was like nothing. I feel foolish not to think I just didn't think that could happen in New South Wales, that the police would do that. It was extreme.
What was going through your mind at that stage, Abigail? Because as you said, you couldn't believe it was happening.
And it had been such a peaceful and lovely, loving rally as well. Like it had been, and there were kids, there were babies. People had babies in prams. There was a kid that the police were chasing at one point. He could have been like maybe 4 or 5. But when one of the police officers, everyone was yelling, let them pray, let them pray. It doesn't take that long, just let them pray. And then one of the police officers was like, oh yeah, they should have thought about that before they came here. And I was just in shock at how aggressive it was. And normally in those sorts of situations when your personal safety is at risk, I think most of us look around for the nearest policeman. And yeah, there were hundreds of them and they were rushing at protesters and throwing them around. People were bleeding. A guy I was there with, 78 years old, they bent his arm back so fiercely that his skin just ripped and he was bleeding everywhere. Like that's a ridiculous amount of force on a 78-year-old who was not resisting anybody, was just trying not to trample people who were praying.
There are some pretty confronting videos online, which people are obviously filming, Abigail, where it seems a number of protesters or people were being held on the ground, they were restrained and then allegedly being assaulted by police officers. Is that what you could see happening unfold before you?
Yeah. Like there was no restraint. They were just rushing. They were running in packs at protesters and just pushing them over. I saw one person who was trying to help another person up and that person then got tackled by police and shoved into the ground. As I say, I saw numerous men who were trying to pray being physically lifted up and chucked. There was medics who were trying to help people who were getting attacked by the police. And I did not see one instance, and I would be honest if I did not see one instance of a protester having a go at a police person. There was some colourful language at times, as you'd expect, but there was no aggression and there was certainly no violence. I did not see that at all. It was completely one-sided and it was like they weren't letting us out, so almost like they were manufacturing the conditions for them to come in and harm people.
Abigail, the Premier and also the Police Commissioner in New South Wales have both come out and defended the police officers' actions during this demonstration. I'm quoting the Premier here. He said, context is important. The circumstances facing New South Wales Police were incredibly difficult. It was, in effect, in the middle of a riot. And the Premier has also said that they were trying to actually stop the demonstrators and Jewish people that were some blocks away, those two groups meeting. What would you say to the Premier's comments about that?
Just extraordinary, shocked all over again by his response. So the ICC, where the Israeli president was in a completely different direction to where protesters wanted to march, which was to Parliament. That was made very clear. Now, if they wanted those protesters to stay away from the ICC, what they could have done is facilitated the march towards Parliament, which is in the opposite direction. They didn't do that. Instead, they stopped people going that way and then tried to stop them going the other way until they could herd them all together. And then they actually did push them towards the west of the city. Like that doesn't stack up at all. They also have this argument that somehow they needed to do this before people broke the law. And I think that's really telling because it was not against the law to gather in Town Hall Square, which is what had happened. Those people weren't allowed to leave. So where I was way back in the square. I was nowhere near the road. I was not breaching any law at all, and nor were the people who were praying. And yet we were apparently all, treated brutally because we maybe might commit a crime. Like, that's not how the law works in Australia. You commit the crime and then you have something to answer for. These people weren't committing crimes. They were just getting assaulted by police. It was brutal. I just can't believe it. It's like something that you see from the US. Like, it's not normal. And that's what I said to the commissioner when I ran into him in the lift. I told him, I said, do you think that was right, that they took me off of those stairs and then that they, basically threw me and then while I was rebounding, punched me in the head and then again in the chest? Is that okay? Like, he said, of course that's not okay.
And what did the commissioner say to you? Are you going to press charges? Do you want to pursue this?
So I need to, I've been getting, unsurprisingly, I've not been in this situation before. So I'm seeking some legal advice first. What the commissioner said to me was he would send somebody to take my statement. I want to get legal advice because unsurprisingly, I don't trust the police anymore. And it's weird, I spend a lot of my time looking into systemic issues, and I have a lot to say about systemic issues in the police, but I've always viewed the majority of individuals in the police force as being, stand-up people, normal people. I'm quite scared now. I just saw hundreds of them punching people and pushing people. And I'm not very inclined to speak to the police right today.
In regards to Mal Lanyon, Abigail, the police commissioner has accused speakers of inciting the crowd to march. We know there was a decision handed down by the Supreme Court to continue those special police powers. He's described the rally as an angry and violent mob. Who is telling the truth here? Would you accuse the police commissioner of lying?
Well, he's clearly at the best misled. Look at the videos. I've heard him say, there's 10 seconds of videos. No. I recorded pretty much all of it. I've got, about an hour of footage. Most people that I know also have an hour of footage. There is so much video out there. I'm quite keen to talk to the lawyers about how they gather that all together because it tells a very compelling picture. Let's say I was on the steps, I could see, and I kept doing, sort of 180 footage from the George Street side to the back of Town Hall Square, and it's a very good record of exactly what went on, and you will not see a misbehaving crowd in that video at all. So the evidence will tell who's telling the truth.
You said before, Abigail, that when this was happening, you couldn't believe this was happening in Sydney. This wasn't happening in Australia, and you were almost comparing to what we're seeing in the US unfold right now. Is that a fair analogy or a comment to make, that you thought you were living in another country?
I do. We've seen this creep, right? This is, in the last 3-4 years, a little more, we've seen the New South Wales government introduce more and more draconian anti-protest laws that are designed to silence, and they're designed to divide, and they're designed to criminalise people who are trying to do the things that, 10 years ago were completely legal. What would have been smart here, if you had a premier who was actually interested in so-called social cohesion and actually cared about people's safety, he never would have put this regulation in the first place that was rushed in last week. And instead, people could have just protested like they normally do. They would have had a peaceful march down towards the Parliament. Everyone would have gone home and there wouldn't be a problem. But what would that show, people that Chris Minns is trying to appeal to? He really, I think, I honestly think he wanted there to be these pictures of the so-called violent protesters so that he then had this propaganda to rely on, when the reality is a huge crowd of people, the biggest I've ever seen in town hall, preaching love and compassion for people who are, being like this credible evidence of a genocide in Palestine, protesting against human rights abuses whilst also showing love for Jewish people and people of all faiths in Australia. That was social cohesion. And then you had the police violently coming in and just, hitting people. It is like something from Trump's America. Like, it's not okay. I don't have better words for it. It's just not okay. And I've been saying, like, I've got 2 teenage girls. I worry that they're going to go out and they're not going to be able to rely on someone to keep them safe, to keep order. Like, there's no one. It's just the police are as likely to sort of hit them as anyone else.
So you would deny any allegations made by the Premier or the Police Commissioner that any of the protesters or people marching were violent or assaulted any police officers? You didn't see any of that?
I honestly did not see a single incident. And I have not seen anyone else show me an incident on video, and no one else that I know there has said of an incident. Like, people used some colourful language when they were saying, like, leave the people alone who are praying. They might have put an F word in there. It wasn't even directed at the police, but, even if it was, that's their words. But I honestly did not hear or see a single act of aggression by a protester. I mean, you look at it, like, people were just standing still in a public place and the police were rushing at them. Like, it's really clear when you look at the footage. Like, this is not a crowd that was, in the bit I was in, there was about 3 or 4 meters between the first person in the crowd and the circle of police before they rushed in. Like, what threat were those police at? It doesn't check out, does it?
Abigail, in regards to the government's responses, we've seen the Premier in New South Wales, Chris Minns, come out and defend the police's actions. We've seen exactly the same rhetoric from the Police Commissioner. The Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, who we know invited the Israeli President to visit Australia, has done a couple of interviews this morning but has not done a news conference. What responsibility do you think the Prime Minister has to have over what's played out?
I think the Prime Minister has lacked courage and leadership at a time when the country really needed it the most. And that's courage and leadership to have actual mature conversations about the events of overseas, what's happening and how it impacts on the communities here. But instead, both Albanese and Minns have embarked on this silencing and this simplistic rhetoric, this idea that, somehow Palestine and Israel are football teams and you pick a side, as though we're not talking about the deaths of innocent civilians. There was an opportunity to have a mature conversation in the same way that, someone like Jacinda Ardern did after the horrible massacre in her country. And yet all we have here is just this real strongman, macho kind of rhetoric about smashing dissent. You can't stamp out hate with hate. It's just not how it works. So a lack of leadership is what we've had from Albanese and his government.
We really appreciate your time, Abigail. We hope you're okay, and thanks very much for speaking with us.
Thank you.
That was New South Wales Greens MP Abigail Boyd. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'll be back in your feed tomorrow morning with a deep dive on the Christchurch terrorist's bid to vacate his guilty plea. We'd love you to subscribe or follow us on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company.